Hey, folks, welcome to the culture. My name is Lee Winnie. I am filling in for Farajii Muhammad, who is on vacation. We're going to do it for the culture today, folks. Yes, we are. We're going to talk about everything from the January 6th committee hearings to R. Kelly and the music legacy. And should you buy your ex's food, children food, if they don't have McDonald's money? Well, all that and more on this episode of The Culture. So let's roll that beautiful bean footage, okay? Okay, folks, this has been a historic month. We've come to the closure of yet another month, and we've seen so much history take place. Now, we've seen the Supreme Court seem unhinged with the rolling back of decades old precedents with the repealing of Roe and them also going after the enforcement of Miranda rights. However, this month has not been all bad. We have seen Miss Ketanji Brown Jackson, who actually will become the first African American female to sit on the Supreme Court, as well as gun legislation that we have not seen in more than 30 years. But we are watching history unfold as we are seeing the January 6th committee hearings. Now, this is something that I never thought I would see in my lifetime, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you thought the same, where we are seeing a former president or United States sitting president do and say the unspeakable. Now, we have recently seen on Tuesday Miss Cassidy Hutchinson, who was a former aide of Donald Trump, actually sit down. This is actually her fifth time sitting in front of the committee, where she actually has done 4 behind closed doors depositions, and she dropped some bombshells. In order to go over this today, I need 2 of the most dynamic culture crew and guests to actually unpack all the things that are going on so we can discuss exactly what is happening and why we should be informed about this. The first one is Mr. Jesse Hamilton McCoy, Esquire. He is Duke University's clinical professor of law and supervising attorney for Civil Justice Clinic. And Mr. Hassan Gordano, Mr. Politics himself. I want to welcome both of you to the show. How are you doing today, the both of you?
Having me.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to talk to you first, Jesse, to kind of go over a little bit for folks who may not understand what are these hearings? What are they for? And what should we be looking for when we're watching them?
So, the purpose of these hearings is to provide some degree of transparency in what this investigation of Donald Trump's involvement in the January 6th insurrection is, as well as talk about all the dynamics that go into the January 6th, whatever you want to call it, insurrection, treason, whatever you want to call it. So, what we now know is that we know that there were Capitol Police officers who were killed as mobs of people tried to storm the Capitol. We also know that there were various representatives whose lives were in danger. We also know that Donald Trump's very own vice president, Mike Pence, was involved in danger, or was a subject or a target of the people. But what the purpose of these hearings is for is to pretty much make it transparent in really what I feel like is an attempt to get the Justice Department to get involved and push along an investigation and ultimately seek conviction against Donald Trump.
Okay, so when we're watching this, because we're seeing this all play out, and we're seeing that he was warned. So Trump and his chief of staff were warned that there could be violence. We're even seeing now that they're saying that he may have wanted to participate in some capacity. He's even been quoted saying things like he doesn't care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt him. What are the next steps? So if this is only to really change the public opinion, and this is a question for the both of you, what is the purpose? Is this a bad thing for the Democrats that they're going after this and there's not really a whole lot that can be done? Can this backfire on them?
Well, I'll first begin by saying it's a bipartisan committee. And as actually probably the most vocal person on the committee has been Liz Cheney, who is Republican. I think that this is also an attempt to try to alleviate some of the misinformation that people have had widespread nationwide about what was happening, who was involved, and just how massive this organization of the operation was. We are now seeing, because of the testimony and because of all of the investigatory work, that even people in the very seat of power in the White House not only knew, but in many cases helped to implement many of the things that we saw unfold on January the 6th.
Okay.
Well, part of the problem is people in this country, and especially in Washington, D.C. these days, want to allude to bipartisanship when you have one or two of the opposite party, right? And that's the problem. This committee is nowhere near bipartisan. You have two disgruntled Republicans that were appointed to this House committee. No other Republican on the House dared to even want to serve on it, let alone be appointed to serve on it. It's almost like the gun legislation we saw pass even in the Senate. I mean, 10 Republicans out of, almost 48, 49, that's really not bipartisanship. That's just certain individuals finally doing what they're supposed to do, their job, and learn how to compromise. This January 6th committee is Democrats dragging it out, hoping to get a bump before the November general election, these midterm elections, where they look to be, in all intents and purposes, going to be trounced and lose the House and probably the Senate as well. I think that they're spending a lot of taxpayer money for something that most people either know one way or the other. You either believe that it happened and it was Donald Trump and their fault, or you don't. And I don't think this committee, the hearings, the televised hearings, are going to change anybody's opinion overnight. They need to be focused on these recent Supreme Court decisions. They'll get more of a live audience for that than they will this.
So you think this is a mistake? So Democrats, are you saying that they should not have done this investigation? This is just a big waste of time from the viewpoint of the American public?
Now, I think so. In order to have the investigation, I think they first appointed a special investigator, right? The House, if you look at investigations of past, anytime the House comes up with an investigation, usually charges aren't filed. They'll come up and, they may slap somebody on the wrist, but nothing's going to really come of it. If you really wanted something to come from this, which I think they should have, and I think most Americans who understood what the insurrection stood for believe the same, you should have had a special investigator. It should not have been through a democratically controlled House. It should have been money set aside just for that, in order to come to conclusions on who was actually responsible. And third, it should not have been a televised miniseries like we're watching Netflix, right? That clearly showed that Democrats were desperate to put this before the American people, thinking that this was somehow going to hurt and affect Republicans at the polls. And if you've seen the primary elections across the country thus far, it has done absolutely nothing to deter Republicans from showing up and from Republican candidates from winning, including those who are backed by the former president.
I agree. I think that it actually had a bit of an adverse effect, especially when you're seeing a lot of these far right Republicans. However, I think that this is something that definitely needed to be done. And I want you guys, the culture out there, you can certainly post your comments on YouTube as well as the Facebook page, so you can weigh in on this. But the former president actually could face charges for conspiracy to defraud and to obstruct an official proceeding. I want to ask you, Jesse. Now, I know that this hearing, the committee cannot do this. They cannot charge him, but the Department of Justice could, and the committee could make a referral. Is that right? Like a criminal referral?
Sure. So the Department of Justice has the ability to prosecute anybody that they feel like violates any of the federal law or statutes. So they have the ability to do it. And from what I understand, there's been an ongoing investigation. But I think I will push back a little bit on my good brother here and say, I think that there is a purpose beyond just the politics of it for this hearing. I think that transparency means a lot. And I think that it really does provide a lot of educational insight into what exactly happened, because not everybody on January 6th was glued to the TV like I was and watching it happen in real time, nor did we know the level of involvement like we suspected. But now we have proof. We have the chief of staff's aide, who is actually coming out and talking about what she personally eyewitnessed from the president and from the chief of staff as these things were developing. This is information that we didn't have before. So as far as the Justice Department, I'm not sure what Merrick Garland's position is. I do know that this is unprecedented and that nobody is ever going after a former president of the United States. And I do know that there is a political push to try to prevent Donald Trump from being able to run again. I don't think that's going to be successful. But at the same time, I think there is definitely a good purpose behind having these hearings.
Yeah, and speaking of which, Cassie Hutchinson, who was a former Trump aide, we want to get to a clip of her because actually at the hearings, because that was the most damning information that we have gotten yet that actually came from her. So I want to play that now so that everyone can hear that.
When I returned to the White House, I walked upstairs towards the Chief of Staff's office, and I noticed Mr. Ornato lingering outside of the office. Once we had made eye contact, he quickly waved me to go into his office, which was just across the hall from mine. When I went in, he shut the door, and I noticed Bobby Engel, who is the head of Mr. Trump's security detail, sitting in a chair, just looking somewhat discombobulated and a little lost. I looked at Tony, and he had said, "Did you effing hear what happened in the Beast?" I said, "No, Tony, I just got back. What happened?" Tony proceeded to tell me that when the president got in the Beast, he was under the impression from Mr. Meadows that the off-the-record movement to the Capitol was still possible and likely to happen, but that Bobby had more information. So once the president had gotten into the vehicle with Bobby, he thought that they were going up to the Capitol, and when Bobby had relayed to him, "We're not, we don't have the assets to do it, it's not secure, we're going back to the West Wing," the president had very strong, a very angry response to that. Tony described him as being irate. The president said something to the effect of, "I'm the effing president, take me up to the Capitol now." To which Bobby responded, "Sir, we have to go back to the West Wing." The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel. Mr. Engel grabbed his arm, said, "Sir, you need to take your hand off the steering wheel. We're going back to the West Wing. We're not going to the Capitol." Mr. Trump then used his free hand to lunge towards Bobby Engel, and when Mr. Ornato had recounted this story to me, he had motioned towards his clavicles.
And was Mr. Engel in the room as Mr. Ornato told you this story?
He was.
Did Mr. Engel correct or disagree with any part of the story from Mr. Ornato?
Mr. Engel did not correct or disagree with any part of the story.
Did Mr. Engel or Mr. Ornato ever after that tell you that what Mr. Ornato had just said was untrue?
Neither Mr. Ornato nor Mr. Engel told me ever that it was untrue.
All right. So when you hear that, this is a sitting president who wants to be in full participation. And of course, this is all coming from her. This is alleged. What does that make you think? Like, do you think that this information, this is something we hadn't heard this type of information yet? We kind of heard that he might have knew, but when you hear he wanted to participate, Jesse, does this change anything?
Well, I think it changes a lot as far as his degree of culpability. It doesn't change perspective. Like, I think we all knew that he was involved in some way, shape, or form. And we saw the video of him hyping up the crowd. But we have to remember what this crowd was going to do. They were going to disrupt the confirmation of the election results. And we already know that Mike Pence was the person who was responsible for confirming. And based on the constitutional duties that he has, he cannot follow through with a lie. So when Trump is saying, "Hey, this election result, there's election fraud, there's widespread, we've been filing cases everywhere, and none of these cases are panning out," he can't hold up that certification process. And what we see is in Mike Pence doing what he is constitutionally obligated to do, Trump didn't want it. He wasn't happy with it. And not only did he gas up people to go in and run in the Capitol, he wanted to be present and be part of it. This is, if there was ever a case for sedition, treason, any of those things, This would be it. But for some reason, we still are seeing kind of a lackadaisical response by the people who are members of the authority, who really should be harping on this, but haven't seemed to do anything.
Do you think it's because he is the president of the United States? It's something about prosecuting someone who was a sitting president that I don't know if the American public can handle that. Do you agree with that, Hassan?
Yeah, it's never going to happen. Whether it's New York and Loretta Lynch, or whether it's Congress and the DOJ, you will never in your lifetime see the DOJ or anybody else prosecute and convict a former sitting president. Regardless, they're going to sweep it under the rug before anything happens. Part of the reason in here, though, here's the problem. We all know that Donald Trump is just crazy, right? Everybody in this country, even his supporters know. That's why they support him. They break his hands. Right? West Wing used to be a show that I loved. Captivated me, but it was a show, right? We knew what it was. I got involved in it, but it had no influence over my everyday life. I liked it. I looked at it. I went on with life. And that's what most Americans are doing with this. They like it. They tune into it. They engage, but they have their own personal feelings. The problem with convicting a president or even charging somebody in this is we have to start with who planned this out. And if you ask most people, and even the hearings that we've seen, nobody has laid out factors that Donald Trump was sitting down with Proud Boys and other groups who had planned this before January 6th. We know that. We know that back in right after the election, they started planning this insurrection to go to D.C. on this day. But nobody can prove that Donald Trump was even a part of that. That in and of itself does not bring charges. And just because you lunged and we know that you're crazy as hell, you want to join your crazy folk up at the Capitol, that I don't think from a legal standpoint is enough evidence to charge a sitting president of all people with any type of actions against this country.
Does this create a level of lawlessness? I mean, I watched this too. Jesse, you were not alone. I was like, oh my goodness, so you seen these white people jump the Capitol? Like, I watched this, but does this create a level of lawlessness for the next person? Because Donald Trump is not the first. I mean, he's not the last, he's the first. So we're going to continue to get these really far right candidates. What does this say, and how do we set up guardrails, or can we? Is there a place for us to set up guardrails for this, Jesse?
Well, I think that's a very loaded question. I think it's very ironic that the person who ran on a campaign of lock her up has done all these things and is just able to skate by. But I also know that here in the United States of America, we operate in a system that is largely rigged. And that system is rigged for the benefit of white men. And I think that not just white men, but rich white men. And Donald Trump qualifies as a rich white man. So what we see is it's not just a Donald Trump thing. We know he's crazy. We know he's doing all kinds of stuff, but it's the insulation of people in high places who support him. The congressman who led people through tours of the Capitol and told them where everybody's offices were. It's the people who were people like Mark Meadows, his chief of staff, who allowed this gas to get into people, to fill them up, to make them want to go and rush the Capitol, and didn't do anything to dissuade it until the 25th hour. And all of a sudden now it's, we need to put a statement out, right? So we see this. I think the issue that I have, and the biggest concern that I think the American people are going to want to know come election time, is we know this man is going to run again, right? So if we're going to say that he can do all of this and there's no accountability and he's going to be able to walk right back into the election, what is the point of having a democracy anymore? What is the point?
Do we know if he's going to run? I mean, he hasn't filed. I don't think he's filed any paperwork as of yet. I think he's borderlining some campaign finance issues. Do we know that for sure?
No. And I honestly, and I've said this on the program before, I don't think Donald Trump, and I would almost guarantee he won't run in 2020. Donald Trump it's all about, in his mind, his reputation, right? That's why the defeat meant so much to him. He's not a man used to losing, right? Especially in such a public manner. Now, here's a person who clearly got beat. All this rigged election doesn't mean anything. He's going to continue with that. But he is now, look at the elections that have happened in these primaries across the country. He is now the leader of the Republican Party. And I would hasten to say, even if somebody ran in 2024 and a Republican became president, the president is supposed to be the sitting member or the chief member of their party at that point. I guarantee Donald Trump, even if he is not that nominee, will still be the most influential person in the Republican Party. His mindset is, if I run and I lose either the Republican primary, I don't even think he gets out of the Republican primary. But if he runs and he loses, what will that do to his reputation? And his reputation means more to him than anything. So I think he realizes his power now as being the leader of the Republican Party, the money that comes with it, the influence that comes with it. And I think that he'll probably put someone up who he says, that's my successor, whether it's our governor from Florida or whoever he wants to tap as his successor. You'll see them as the nominee for the Republican Party in 2024. But I don't think he'll run at all.
Okay, that's definitely an interesting perspective. I think most people believe he probably will run. But I want to ask the culture. The culture has been checking in. So thank you guys so much for doing so. Truth is Power is saying, I'm just saying it is just me, or is this thing drawing out longer and longer? They should have prosecuted him when they impeached him the first time for war crimes. On bring on the cuffs. I don't know if you're gonna ever see a former president or sitting president in handcuffs ever. But thank you for your comment. Donita Jackson actually says, sometimes I believe they take all this time to give us time to process and not totally black out for what they knew they would always do, which is absolutely nothing. I kind of agree, because there's not a whole lot they can do. The Prince says, what a scam with no cross exam. And then Janae, thank you for checking in. She says, we need to get over formality of not arresting a president, and we need to see the written law as to why not lock him up. Nobody is above the law. Now, I want to talk because for Republicans, Benghazi, we're still hearing about Benghazi to this day from Republicans. What made that flip? Because now, this is the party of lock her up, like Jesse said. And now it's like, no, it's okay. How do you stand on that as patriots? And you're supposed to be a patriot, and you're allowing this type of behavior to continue.
I think, politics is a strange place with strange bedfellows, right? So I think that when it comes to politics, people are going to follow the folks who are accomplishing the things they want accomplished and making them look good, right? And say what you want about Trump, but everything that the Republican Party wanted, he has delivered. Mainly, you look at just last week, the Supreme Court decisions that have come out. Everything that they want, he has delivered. Now, what I will also say is this is a dangerous precedent. If we are going to say, that the thing that Black people in America always knew, masked white folks run the world, right? If we're going to say that this is what is going to govern, then everybody should have the liberty to be able to do the very same thing. We should all be able to run up in Capitol Hill when we don't get our way. And that's going to promote some degree of lawlessness. So I think somebody's going to suffer. I don't think it's going to be the people who were the architects of the system who orchestrated it. I think it's going to be those low-level hanging fruit, the Proud Boys and the folks like that they can get in there, throw them away, say, oh, look at them, they're the bad people. And then they go back to their jobs in Congress or wherever. I also think that it's important for the American people, if we want an informed voting citizenry, it is important for the American people to not be apathetic when something like this happens. If there was ever a time to not be apathetic, that time is now. And you need to take inventory of who was where and who did what. I don't know that anything's going to come out of it. And I know one of the commenters made a great comment about all this without cross-examination. Well, in a legislative proceeding, there is no cross-examination, but there's also not going to be criminal charges that stem from the Senate. It's going to have to come from the Justice Department, right? And he'll get a trial. Everybody does. He'll, have an opportunity to present or to plead the fifth and not say anything, right? But I think it's important for us to at least have the facts. And if nothing else, that's what we're getting with this proceeding.
I agree with you. And I appreciate you both for discussing this. We're going to have to leave this particular matter there. We will see what comes out. They are going on a break, I believe, until July the 12th. So we will see what happens after that. But we're going to hit a break, and then we're going to talk about gun laws and legislation and what we should do about that.
Verizon just gave us all a brand new iPhone 13.
We've been customers for years.
We got iPhone 13s too. Switched 2 minutes ago, literally right before this.
iPhone 13 on us on any unlimited plan for every customer, with plans starting at just $35. All on the network more people rely on.
Love our new Alexa.
It's a Buick.
Yeah, Alexa.
Buick.
Alexa.
It's a Buick.
It's an Alexa. It's a Buick. It's an Alexa. Coach, that's a Buick. That's an Alexa.
The Buick Enclave with available Alexa built-in.
Pull up a chair. Take your seat. The Black Tape. With me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Hey, Black, I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
And we're back. This is Lise Winning. I am filling in for Farajii Muhammad on The Culture. Right now, we're going to talk about guns. This country has a gun problem, and we have been dealing with this for far too long. We did pass some gun legislation, but I want to discuss whether or not this will actually make any change. This year alone, we've seen unprecedented amount of mass shootings occur all over the country. We did get the gun safety package. It's a bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which includes $750 million to states to support red flag laws. In 19 states and DC actually already had them. It will close the boyfriend loophole. It actually will make gun buyers under 21 get enhanced background checks. It will clarify the definition of federally licensed firearms, and also new offenses for gun trafficking, make and straw purchases. So I want to ask my culture crew whether or not they believe that we will see any change from this law that actually was passed.
Not at all.
Okay.
First of all, there was no such thing as gun reform until free blacks started purchasing guns across the country. Then they had to reform because they realized the Negroes were, these free slaves were now all of a sudden purchasing the same guns that they had access to. So let's be real about it. It's like brother said earlier in the show, this system is designed to keep a certain portion in power and the other ones suppressed at all times. That's what these guns are about. And so looking at the New York law and how it reversed, if you look, New York is similar in its laws to about a half a dozen states, including right here in Maryland. So those states, including California and the others, make up about a quarter of the entire population of America. So this is going to have a dramatic effect in terms of the court decision. And I think that'll have a greater impact on America and guns in itself than the legislation. This legislation, you read off the provisions in it, is far different from what Democrats had in mind, who really wanted to raise the age limit from 18 to 21 in order for anyone who wants to purchase a semi-automatic rifle, incentives for safe storage of firearms, especially in the household. Those things aren't in place. If you really want reform, those are the type of reforms you need. But at the end of the day, look, it took 30 years, almost 30, 28 years for them, these people in Congress, to finally have the testicular fortitude to do anything around guns. And they really failed to do really anything that's going to help America in regards to guns. And it's unfortunate, but Republicans do this all the time. I've never seen Democrats be able to run the table the way Republicans do. It's like, oh, we got this, but we'll compromise with you just to get stuff done. Republicans don't compromise. This is what we're going to do. If you don't like it, so what? We're going to do it any damn way. We saw President Obama with his choice for Supreme Court, how that went about. So, at the end of the day, I think the court case from the Supreme Court had more an effect. It will have more of an effect on this country than the legislation that passed.
Okay. And I can definitely see that. And you're absolutely right. Republicans, they know how to get stuff done. They can stand behind. I think Jesse and I were talking about this. They can stand behind that they are the majority in a lot of cases, or they represent the majority of the United States of America. So it makes it a lot easier to get this stuff passed. But I will ask you this. So do you not believe that there were 10 Republicans? This is something that even with bills being passed and legislation, we usually have a stonewall. This was some movement for them to at least concede to some things. Do you not see that we're moving in a direction, or do you still think that, no, this isn't going to have any impact whatsoever?
No, because if you really wanted, looking at how this country is moving, right? Looking at Buffalo and Texas and all these mass shootings, this should have been unanimous. The hell with 10 Republicans. Every Republican in the Senate and the House should have said, you know what? We need some type of compromise. We can't allow children to continue to die in mass shootings like this and just turn a blind eye because of the Second Amendment and because of all the people that continue to fund them and make them millionaires. So to me, 10 Republicans saying, oh, yeah, let's make the party look good. Half of them are up for re-election. So a lot of them were doing it for political purposes and not so much, for conviction. That's the problem we have in this country is you have this far right and your far left, and we don't have legislators actually representing the interests of the people and saying, doesn't matter what I believe, let's do what is in the best interest of the American citizenry. That thing has gone out the window.
I think a lot of Americans, I think there's a nice amount of us who we think we have too many guns. There's just way too many guns in this country. But I think there's a nice amount of people who believe that you should own a gun and you should have the right to do so, and as well as owning an AR-15. I want to get your opinion on this, Jesse. Do you think that we should ban certain guns? Because in '94, Clinton did sign an assault weapons ban, which expired 10 years after they allowed that to expire. Do you think that it's the type of guns that we have in this country, and if we ban some of them, it could help prevent some of the death of mass shootings?
So I'll be honest and say I'm of two minds on this, right? I do think we should ban it, but I want them to ban it after I make sure that I got just as many as they got. Because I don't want to be the one caught lacking. So I feel like one of the things that is important for us to kind of understand is there is a lot of money from the gun lobbyists, from the NRA, that gets funneled into politics. And that money is going to go largely to conservatives and conservative causes. So they have a vested interest. It's kind of like you can't ask a politician to shoot themselves in the foot, probably a bad pun, but to shoot themselves in the foot and stop the gravy train that's keeping them in office. And so we have to come to the realization that it's just not going to come from the Republican Party. And one of the things we mentioned before was just about how it seems like the Republican Party is always able to, stay on message and go through their agenda. But I will put this out there. We talked about this a little before the show. It's really easy to stay on brand and stay on agenda when you are representing the hegemony and essentially acting as a monolith, right? So if the issue is going to keep people with guns and the issues are going to support white men, rich white men, and the things they want to do, you don't really have a lot of diversity of opinion there. The harder part is trying to build these coalitions of people to overturn things. Now, the last thing I'll say is guns are pretty much in the DNA of America. Like that's how we got our freedom. Yeah! I just don't see how people are going to, or especially the people who use those guns to get their freedom in the first place from, taxation, but that's another story. I don't see how they are going to ever turn their back on what they view as their savior and the thing that helped them go out and conquer the Wild Wild West and, fight in D-Day and all of this stuff. They're not going to do it. I do think that there is a role here for states particularly to step up because they have police powers within their borders to step up and start emphasizing the kinds of limitations that they want to put on gun reform. But I think we're at a point now where if babies getting killed at a school isn't going to move somebody, I think that ship has sailed.
I agree with you. I think that we do need to start somewhere and maybe banning some of the types of weapons that are out there, which is something, it's not in the bill. Like, this is something the Democrats wanted. It's just not in the bill. Like you said, universal background checks, it's just not in the bill. These are things that they just couldn't get done. But when we look back in 94, when they did ban it, they say that mass shootings went down. And I know that a lot of people want to use this for hunting, which I'm like, if you're using an AR-15 for hunting, I mean,
you suck.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's okay. But we've had so many. In February 2018, Douglas High School, 17 people dead using the shooter used an AR-15. October 2017, the Las Vegas shooter also used an AR-15. Sutherland Springs Church in Texas, 26 killed. And all of these were AR-15s. So if we had less, I think, of those types of weapons, I think we could save more lives. But I want to ask you, not even just about these assault style weapons, we also have a problem with handguns in this country. And I don't want to say black on black crime because that is just not true. Because you're probably, if you live in a community, you're more likely to get assaulted or robbed by somebody that looks like you because they're the people that live in your community. But we do have a problem in this country with people getting killed with handguns and just murder in general. How do we handle that with gun violence? How do we do that? You can't really pass that in legislation.
And that's the huge problem we have, even with this new law and laws across the country, is I'm in Baltimore. We've had 300 plus homicides every year for 8 years straight now. Many of those homicides did not come from guns from people who had guns legally. Let's be honest about it. So legalizing or illegalizing handguns is not going to stop. And most of those guns were not AR-15s. They were handguns. So then that begs the question of, okay, then what do we regulate? Because I agree. I'm a Second Amendment believer. I think we all should be strapped, in my opinion, and from black to white. But there is a question of what type of weapons do we need AR-15s and these type of guns to protect your household? Because that's really what it was all about, is to be able to protect your property back in the day. That's when it all created. So I do think we need that. But what's the regulation? Because you can be able to now go online and create guns, but you can rig a certain magazines to be automatic and let off a certain amount of rounds beyond the usual 13, 15 rounds of an automatic gun, right? So there are ways around it, but it's a lot easier to regulate something when you don't have those type of weapons being sold, especially to 18 and 19 and 20-year-olds. I mean, I don't want to make age as a factor as if, an 18-year-old is more, vicious than a 46-year-old. But I think if we look at the laws that we have in this country, you can't even drink alcohol until you're 21. But yet you can go and purchase an AR-15 at 18 years old. There's certain things that are wrong with the laws that we have currently in this country. But again, the argument has to be made from the legislators who are supposed to represent you and I's interests, but they're actually up there representing their own, and we have no voice in that matter.
Yeah, I want to ask you this, Jesse. I don't know if you can answer this question, but I do want to get your opinion on it. So Black people in this country, we have a really unique relationship with guns because we do want to feel safe. We don't want to give up our weapons because we are woefully unprotected in this country. Do we need to change the relationship that Black people have with guns? Because we see it in music videos and songs, and it's almost glorified. Like we were seeing the prom pictures come out. I don't know if you guys saw them. And I saw it was a young lady and a guy. They were standing around with, they did have AR-15s. Like, how do we change this behavior and this relationship?
So how do we change gun culture? That is a heavy, heavy question. I think that, as was mentioned before, I think one of the concerns we have for the actual crimes that do happen It's people who aren't, getting it legally. It's people who aren't necessarily getting their stuff registered and not even registered to be carriers, and I don't know that there's a way to regulate that kind of criminality. I think what the process that largely the Democrats have been pursuing is if we just, put blanket regulations out there to stop the flow of how many guns come in or go out, then that'll reduce the number of guns that end up in people's hands. But I'm not convinced that that's what's happening. I think people have cousins and uncles and folks in other states that can get them whatever they need. I think that what we also need to do, and this is, particularly for young people, we don't have a lot of like conflict resolution, community centers, all the stuff that I remember growing up. That stuff has been defunded, closed down. And so what people have largely been doing is, because we know that there's danger in certain elements in certain places, and because people don't have other economic opportunities to be able to grow, we've basically left people to fend for themselves. So folks get caught up. They get caught up in gang life. They get caught up in drug life. They get caught up in whatever. And our media, our system sometimes has a tendency to glamorize that stuff. So people say, okay, if I got bigger guns, I'll get more women and I can go make more money. And so I think that it originates, it's American. It's like apple pie. It originates in, we know that the power of the gun gets things done. That's what people know. But I think we also need to start thinking about what kind of society that we want to have ultimately. And if we want to have a society of people who are able to work their problems out without the need for a weapon, because most of these people aren't defending their homes when they, shoot folks. If we're trying to have a society that can progress without the need or dependence on weapons, I think that we need to bring back tools that are going to train people, particularly young folks, on how to do that.
Okay. Now I want to ask the culture. The culture has been tuning in, and thank you so much for doing so. Rashida Guest said that gun problem is a major understatement. I agree with you there. And Tiana says Republicans can stay on message. I think that that's always been the benefit of Republicans, that they take a message and they can run with it. We have RJ Coleman 3. Thank you so much for checking in. He says gun ownership is not a Democrat or Republican thing. I agree with you. And I think that's another reason why it's so hard to pass legislation, because I think that Democrats and Republicans alike, we all in this country, we like guns. We love our guns and apple pie. Truth is Power said, I have a problem with Black people killing other Black people, but I also have a problem with me having a gun and a gun being registered, but a cop mistaking that and murdering me anyway. Yep. And that's another thing. We don't really have, any types of protections in this new bipartisan law for people and registered gun owners, because we did see that, where there were people that were registered licensed gun owners and still were killed by the police. And that's why I think that we do have a very interesting relationship, African Americans, with guns in this country, because I want to ask Hassan this. If they were to pass some legislation, do you think even they could get the support of Black people to get behind it if they were going to start banning certain types of weapons or banning guns altogether?
No, absolutely not. See, here's the real crux about it. Guns don't kill people. Stupid ass people with guns kill people, right? I ain't never seen a gun.
Guns don't kill people?
Huh?
Guns don't kill people?
No, people can. Have you ever seen a gun shoot somebody by itself? It doesn't. It comes from a mentality of individual. Here's the thing. We're not the only country in this world that has guns, but look at the fatality rates of these other countries. We have a culture in this country that allows for the element and the mental health of an officer, a racist officer, many of them, who pulls the trigger on a Black person, who is scared of a Black person's shadow, let alone that person, right? And until they can have a mental health reversal and being able not to be that way, that's who they are. It's the same way we have across the country. These individuals who are shooting people on the streets of Chicago and Baltimore and others, they don't have licensed guns. This is a mentality that they're taught through, I don't care if it's through music. I'm a big thing about these new video games. You saw that in Buffalo. That kid saw and used and emulated what he saw in a game. If you look at the video and exactly how he held the weapon, how he shot people, because this is what they're playing 24/7. children absorb what's around them. Our children are starting to be perpetuated by what they see on TV, which is largely these video games, whatever that gun, whatever they steal the cars, whatever that damn game, that you're cussing, you're killing people, and you're getting points for it. You get more points for how many people you kill and how many cars you steal. This is a culture in our society you don't see in other societies, in other countries. And that's why it doesn't perpetuate the way it does with their guns, because their mentality is not the same. We really have to deal with mental health in this country, but it's the third wheel of politics, and nobody really wants to talk about that.
It's a harder thing to manage. It's a harder thing to manage mental health. And I think that's why they go after the guns. But, is this a lose thing for Democrats? Like, if Democrats are going after gun control, do you think that this is a losing issue, especially with those middle of the road voters who are kind of in the middle? They're not really sure. And it seems like the United States is coming after their guns, even though, like I said, this legislation is quite soft. Do you think this is a losing issue for them?
Well, I'll just say this. I think that there's not really a great understanding of what we already have going on currently, because just like we were talking about before, there are people who have done all the appropriate legal steps to have gun ownership, and they're still killed by police. I thought of Philando Castile, and the fact that we all were thinking if there was ever a time for the NRA to come out and say something, now would be the time. He did everything he was supposed to do, and there was radio silence. And I think that gives you sort of the inference as to who they are really out for in protecting. And it all goes into what we've been talking about this whole episode. It's certain people can have guns. Certain people can be able to exercise their rights fully, whereas other people we're going to be afraid of, we're going to be scared of. I remember seeing one of the Black Lives Matter marches, I think it was St. Louis, where that old white couple was standing out. One had a pistol and one had assault rifle or a rifle. And as people were walking by, like not bothering them, just walking by, they were standing out there and they got photo ops and everything. So, obviously we have a priority over people having guns and certain people being able to keep them. We also saw that just historically, the only time that we've ever had widespread gun reform was with the Mulford Act, after the Black Panther Party stood out on the courthouse steps with their guns. So when Black people get them, as was said by my brother before, like, Black people get them, there's going to be reform. But in the interim, nobody really cares. And of course, the gun manufacturers don't care because they're going to make money because we're all buying them, right?
Right.
So, I think I don't want to say it's a lost cause, because I definitely think it's a problem. I think that other countries don't resort to guns like we do. Other countries, there are countries that have knife issues and all that stuff, but other countries don't really resort to guns, and they do have a different mentality. And I think part of that is American isolationism and everybody kind of not being communal and feeling like they're on their own, and then poverty being criminalized and all kinds of stuff that are probably a lot bigger of a show to talk about. but I just don't know. I think gun legislation is one of those things that nobody is going to support unless they know everybody else is going to be willing to hold themselves to the same degree of accountability. And since nobody wants somebody to outgun them, it just won't happen.
Yeah, because I think Canada did something like that where they banned guns temporarily. I don't know how that, turned out for them, or they were trying to do something like that. So we'll see. But I do want to ask you, Hassan, or Mr. Politics, rather. We said that this is very soft. This is soft legislation. They did not allow you to be able to sue the gun manufacturers, which is something that Joe Biden mentioned. We don't get universal background checks. So they're not delivering for the far left. And this is something that the far right doesn't want. For the party in power, is this a losing issue for them?
Yeah, I don't. This is certainly not an issue. As a political consultant, I would tell them straight up, leave this alone, right? Because the Second Amendment, this is what the Supreme Court just ruled on with the New York law, is a lot of these are state laws, right? California has 16 laws before them right now that Governor Newsom said he's going to sign every single one of them in, especially after this recent Supreme Court decision. Some of them are what Democrats wanted in Congress and couldn't get passed, including being able to sue the gun manufacturers, which I think is taking it way too far. But so states have that right to implement and go further than they need to. And you're going to see that. You're going to see the southern states be a little bit more open to the Second Amendment and not have any restrictions. You're going to see states like New York and Maryland and California and others start to strengthen their gun laws. And the problem is that is not a national issue that you can really run on that's going to win. You know, politics is local, as they say. So you start locally. You got to know, you know, where your bread and butter is. And I think November, especially this year, Democrats need to focus on the economy, because that's the number one issue that will always affect any voter. I don't care what your race is, your color, your creed, or your party affiliation. If your pockets is pinched and you ain't got no money in the bank and inflation is going up, I don't care whoever's in charge, they're getting blamed for it. So those are things that they can, these recent decisions by the Supreme Court, especially with Roe v. Wade being overturned, these are issues that are winning issues that they can run on and be able to get their voters to the polls in order to change hearts and minds. Otherwise, you keep focusing on January 6th and guns, man, you're going to lose, I mean, at least 50 seats in the House and probably 10 to 20 Senate.
Wow, that's some bleak forecasting you're doing for the Democrats. But I want to go back to the culture. Real Brooklyn checked in. Thank you so much. He's saying gun legislation wouldn't have helped Las Vegas dude. He was 64 years old. The max age of 21 wouldn't help. The bigger problem is America has a huge love for guns. I agree with that. Real Brooklyn also goes on to say, and we all know why the Second Amendment will never be amended. It's the last thing doctrine-wise to make white folks feel safe and others that do not look like them. Okay. And Mike V says firearms create agency for Anglo-Saxon identity. Davey Floaters said how to change gun culture. We need to confront the military-industrial complex somehow. Okay. And then we have RJ Coleman 3 says we've always had the most guns. The culture changed. I don't know if the culture changed. I think the culture is staying the same, and I think that we love our guns, and we're not going to see very many changes from that. But we'll see, because we definitely have a problem with crime in this country, but also inflation. So I think the Democrats are trying to play to both. Thanks again, gentlemen, for I'm sorry, were you trying to say something? Okay, I thought I cut you off. But I appreciate both of you gentlemen for talking about this issue. It is a hot button issue, and it is something that the United States, we do need to do something about. We're going to hit a break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about cannabis and legalizing cannabis in the United States and what that looks like after this.
iPhone 13 on us for every customer. Current, new, everyone. To show the love.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
How about sushi?
I just had sushi for lunch yesterday.
How about tacos?
Automatic emergency braking, one of 6 advanced safety features standard on every 2022 Chevy Equinox. Find new technology. Find new roads. Chevrolet.
All right. You have tuned into The Culture with Farajii Muhammad. I am Lise Winnie, filling in for Farajii while he is on vacation. He will be back next week. So we're going to talk a little bit about cannabis and whether or not we should be looking at this issue. Right now, the Democrats have everything going wrong with the economy is out of control. We have crime that's going up and no one can agree on anything. One thing that the American public can agree on is that more and more of them want to see the legalization of cannabis. And I wanted to bring in a professional who this is what she does. I will say that we go back like babies and pacifiers. She is a sister from another mother. It is Ashley, the cannabis nurse. She is a registered nurse and the owner of Cannabis Nursing Solution. She is also an author of ACEs Medicine. I want to bring Ashley into the show so that we can discuss whether or not, hey, how are you doing? Whether or not we should be talking more about the legalization of cannabis and what this actually would mean for the progression of people of color. Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm fine. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly.
All
So
right, cool.
Let's start there. We're not really hearing a whole part about cannabis and it becoming legal in this particular election cycle. We are seeing certain states that are bringing this to the forefront and more talk about actually making recreational cannabis something that more people have access to. Can you discuss a little bit about how this could benefit African Americans who have been greatly impacted by the war on drugs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that cannabis comes from right now, the state of cannabis from a like policy standpoint, it comes from a more capitalistic standpoint. So how can the states increase revenue, especially after COVID and all the shutdowns and things of that nature? The other aspect of it is the war on drugs that happened in the 80s and 90s. A lot of people went to jail just off of minor possession charges. And continues to happen in some states, even though there is decriminalization in a lot of states at this point. And in addition to that, most states allow for some form of cannabis. One thing that comes up sometimes when I'm talking to different patients is, can I carry it in the car? How do I get it from the dispensary to my house? Things of that nature, because people are just scared to get pulled over and somebody suspect that they may have cannabis on them. And unfortunately, police do have the right to, under suspicion or whatever it is, whatever the law is, that to be able to, detain you if they suspect something. But the issue becomes, what if I'm not carrying THC, flower that has THC in it? A lot of people don't realize that cannabis has a lot of different like chemicals in it. The one that everybody knows is THC, the one that's psychoactive and everybody's scared of. But it also has CBD in it. And CBD is the one that's not so scary, right? And it's actually legal per the Farm Bill for you to carry it, distribute it, however you want to, basically. So if I, let's say, have flower that has that CBD on my body, and maybe I get pulled over by somebody and I happen to be of color, which you already have a stigma on you just because of the color of your skin, you're more at risk of being, detained or, some progressive action to occur. The other part of it is, I mentioned earlier, it is based in capitalism, the fact that we're progressing it forward, and dispensaries and the cannabis industry are making billions of dollars. And Maryland alone, I believe it was like $600 billion in revenue in 2021.
Oh, wow.
But you have a bunch of Black and brown people sitting in jail to this day whose families have been destroyed based on the war on drugs over 20 years ago. And, when things like that happens in Black and brown families, the legacy just trickles on to the future. So, I in my role, I don't spend a whole lot of time focusing on the policy aspect of it. I actually focus more time on the wellness aspect of it. So, because it is a layered issue when it comes to cannabis, but from a general standpoint, okay, go ahead.
Let's go there. So there are benefits of cannabis. especially from the medical side, that I don't know if a lot of people understand. I think people just see, you know, what they saw in the movies, and they don't realize that cannabis actually has a lot of medical benefits. And that's one of the reasons why we should go towards legalizing and researching it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and that's where I was going. So, you know, it's a layered issue with the policy side of things, the racial impact of it. But the other part of it is Black and brown people deserve access to medicine that they should have had access to for centuries, to be honest with you. A lot of people don't realize we have what's called an endocannabinoid system. It's the largest neurotransmitter system in the body. You have it. If you're watching, you have it. You don't have to ask a question about it. And you make your own cannabinoids, which I mentioned earlier, THC and CBD are examples of cannabinoids, but there's over 100 in the plant. But your body actually makes 2 of its own. That's similar to THC and binds to the endocannabinoid system similarly. With that being said, a lot of people are deficient in cannabinoids within their bodies. And the whole point, oops, I'm sorry, my dog's barking. But our bodies need those cannabinoids and that system to help maintain homeostasis. And in the medical world, we call homeostasis like wellness or balance, or if you do yoga, like we're always trying to achieve optimal wellness or balance within the body. You know, in its most natural state, your body, it's supposed to be regulated, and your endocannabinoid system plays a part in that. And a lot of people, whether they know it or not, and this is just a general statement, a lot of people who do consume know that it makes them feel better, but they don't really understand how to intentionally make themselves feel better. So my perspective, especially when it comes to the Black and brown community, generally comes from how can we be more well and be more intentional about what we put in our bodies, and whether it's cannabis or any other herbal medicine, plant medicine, or even, you know, pharmaceuticals that we purchase, how can we limit how much we insert into our body that doesn't need to be there? How can we be the most safe about it? And I think when it comes to legalization conversations, these are the things that don't come up. It should be more part of the conversations to help kind of lean towards whatever the debate issue is when it comes to cannabis.
So if you are a medical cannabis user, and let's say you're in Colorado and you go to another state, you could be technically prosecuted, correct? Or
yeah, you can. That's called interstate trafficking. You're not supposed to take it over the lines. So like, you know, we're in Maryland. So if you go from Maryland to DC, technically you can't bring anything from DC to Maryland. It's illegal. If you get caught, you'll go to jail. And the fines are hefty. Okay. I think for the first offense, you can serve up to like 3 years in jail or something like that. And up to the second offense, it becomes a felony and all these things. And then there are mandatory minimums behind it as well. So where the judge, if they were to persecute you on a federal level, they can only persecute you at, I think, 85% of the minimum or whatever. I forget the exact number, but they can't go any lower than what that minimum is. So you going to jail.
Oh, wow. Wow. No. So I want to ask you, how can nurses in your profession, well, one, what is a cannabis nurse? Because I think for the first time, some people are hearing this term and they're like, what is that? And then two, how can nurses advocate more for the legalization to help Black and brown people and really everyone, because cannabis can be used for everyone?
So my role as a cannabis nurse is to educate. So let me break it down a little bit further. So my role as a nurse is to advocate for patients, educate patients, administer medicine. So it usually shows up, or what people are most familiar with is when you're in the hospital, your nurse comes in, they offer you some information about maybe your procedure, and then give you some medicine, you know, to prepare you for the procedure or help you relieve pain or whatever it is that's going on with you at that time. Your role as a cannabis nurse is similar, where we provide you with education, information, things you may not know in relation to your body. You know, that endocannabinoid system that I brought up, you know, letting you know that exists for you. How can you optimize it? Because optimizing your endocannabinoid system, it goes beyond just the plant medicine, but like just your overall, like, what do you eat? You know, what type of exercise you do. So as a nurse, I would give you some suggestions on how to optimize and will help come up with goals, help come up with the specific outcomes that we're looking for, or that you're trying to achieve based on your condition at that moment. So how can nurses help advocate? I think, the lowest hanging fruit for a nurse in particular is to be able to provide their patients with evidence-based information, provide their patients with a place where they can discuss whatever is going on with them. The number one reason why a lot of patients consume is usually pain. So if you're dealing with a patient who's suffering from severe pain and they come to you, being able to ask the question, do you consume to mask any pain or, to help you with any chronic pain is like the simplest thing you can do. And then to dig deeper into how often do you consume? Why do you consume? Are there any other contributing factors and things of that nature? Beyond that, the nurse's role is to advocate. We don't typically use our voice to do that, but, going to, understanding the policy that's being built around it, being a subject matter expert for these work groups that happen when they're trying to implement different guidelines and legislation that's passed. Those are all things the nurse is able to do. And then generally just providing education to the public.
Okay, the culture has chimed in, and I wanted to go over some of the comments. I think there are quite a few. There's a couple I think you might want to answer. So Hotep Pan Africa says marijuana has been demonized since the 1930s when it was very popular among jazz musicians. That is very true. Thank you for checking in. Davey Floater said marijuana helped me with insomnia and appetite loss, which I believe is one of the benefits. Mike Green said, yeah, let's play games of chance, which kids will become addicts for profit. Is this something, something that is concerning to a lot of people about the addiction factor of cannabis?
Yeah, it is. So my position on it is that not it's a tool. It's not something that everybody should have access to. Everybody should be consuming on a regular basis. No, I'm not saying, let your kids just go off and smoke some weed, because there are some negative effects that can occur. But there is a small population of children who actually need and can benefit from cannabis, maybe for like epilepsy, things of that nature. With all of that being said, at the end of the day, like baseline, like if you have it in your home, whether you're using it for recreational purposes or medical purposes, lock it up. You lock up your Dilaudid, your oxycodone, and everything else, but for some reason, people don't feel like they need to lock up their cannabis. I'm not sure I understand. So that's my position.
Okay. And brother King Lee, thank you for checking in. He says, my concern is that folks should be responsible in their use of cannabis, medical or non-medical usage. You just mentioned that about being responsible. And then we have HTC Sensation XL says there are too many male voices where cannabis is concerned. As with abortion and other issues, cannabis was used as a medicinal plant to treat period pains, which I believe is in the Bible. What do you say about that? Are there not enough voices outside, whether they be Black and brown folks and women, in advocating for this?
I ain't getting into that male-female thing. I'm just not. But I will say this. It is valid that you can use cannabis for period pain, endometriosis, various women's issues, pelvic issues. They actually have like different products out there for those kind of things. And when you put cannabis on the mucosa, it actually absorbs quickly. So that's why you want to use it in the vaginal area in that particular case. As a general note, it helps with pain in general. So whether you're male, you're female, Black, white, whatever, it helps with pain. And it really is about just having a clear understanding of what you're consuming, how much you're consuming. I mentioned those and it's a lot more that goes into it. So, I know a lot of people might have a lot of differing opinions, but I only get a half an hour to explain it to y'all. But, if you take the ratio of CBD to THC, that ratio, and using very small doses of it, it can bind to that endocannabinoid system very intentionally and, get, pain relief, get epilepsy relief, get anxiety relief, get whatever. And from my point of view as a nurse, the goal is to increase quality of life for people. So, maybe you're not, whoever, I'm not saying you, the commenter, but maybe you're not the person who maybe needs cannabis, but there are people who, that may not be bedridden through the consumption of cannabis. There are people who maybe can't go to school because they're suffering from severe pain, or maybe have peg tubes because they can't eat, or, and the list goes on. So, some of the things that I've seen that happen to people from medical conditions can be devastating. And for those people, cannabis can absolutely be helpful. When it comes to recreational, everybody gets a choice, and that's my stance.
Okay. Yes, and there's definitely things that can be done. We had Nicole Spicer says cannabis should be legalized federally. It has been criminalized for decades, and African Americans have taken the brunt of that criminalization with lengthy prison sentences for minor possession. And I think that also when we're looking at making sure that everyone understands that cannabis is just not this drug that certain people
cure everything.
Yeah, it's not going to cure everything, which I think you could probably speak more to that, since we're seeing it more and more on products on shelves. And I don't know if some people don't realize that cannabis isn't legal federally, because we are seeing CBD and people assume that that is the same when it is in fact not. But when we are looking at things like you have a book coming out, Stigmatized, which is coming out. Can you explain to us a little bit about what your book is about and how it will help us to destigmatize cannabis so that it can get federally approved and researched overall?
Yeah, no, the idea of a stigma, I've grown to learn. So when I first entered the industry, I did hit a lot of backlash, or just resistance in general to some of the concepts that I've explained even here today. And what I realized, it's when you're talking to people about something that has been programmed so deeply into our understanding of society through, the war on drugs, for example, we're all familiar with, or this is your brain on drugs. These are concepts that were embedded very deeply into a lot of us when we were children. And a lot of us believe that wholeheartedly, and I was one of those people too. But we do the same thing for a lot of ideas. So, I am Black, so this means this. I am a nurse, so that means that, right? And I realized in a lot of ways that I was trying to perform based on what the stigma is, right? Like I was trying to be the nurse that everybody thought I was supposed to be. I was trying to be the Black woman, the strong Black woman, like everybody thought I was supposed to be. And when I didn't perform at that, based on that construct, I realized that it broke me down in a lot of ways. So the idea behind stigma comes up the most when it comes to cannabis, like that resistance to accepting any ideas around the topic that may be against what we understand. But the reality is we all function within stigma. So how can we identify the layers that make us who we are, and then being able to put context around it so that way you don't judge me and I don't judge you?
Yes, I definitely hear that. And you also wrote Ace's Medicine, which for a lot of folks, they may not know exactly what the book is about. Ace's Medicine is a children's book that you wrote for kids that are on medical cannabis, because there is a lot of stigma that it goes into actually taking their medicine that's actually prescribed to them. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is actually based off of an actual kid here in Maryland. And back in 2020, a bill was passed that allows cannabis in the school system. So essentially now the kid who advocated for it can go to school and they can take their medicine, the school nurse can administer. In most situations, a nurse is not allowed to administer cannabis because of its Schedule I status, or that is federally illegal. So generally it's a patient-driven medication, but this bill says, hey, this kid can take this medicine on school grounds and be administered by the school. Before, the kid's parents would have to drive to the school, pick the kid up, drive him off to school, and give him his tincture, and then drive him back to the school, sign him in, take him back to class. And it was disruptive to his school day. So now he has access to it in the school grounds. So anyway, when they passed the bill, I was asked to help build the guidelines, the rules around the implementation of the bill. And when I sat on that work group, it was, I mean, it's a beautifully written document, but there were still more questions around just the social impact, the context. So, kid A has this chronic disease, pretty much traumatized from the medical condition, and now going to school and taking this medicine, which further makes him different because there are these opinions about him. And, who's going to help this child? Who's going to support this child? Is it the teacher? Is it the school nurse? Because the nurses aren't informed. They're not educated. The teachers aren't informed. They're not educated. And then the kids are learning from their parents, who generally they're us, who already has a stigma. So we're teaching the kids that, cannabis is bad. So when that conversation comes up, how do we deal with those type of conversations? Because that's just where we are in society now. And so the book kind of goes through what that experience looks like for this one kid. His name is Asa. And, in the ideal situation, how can the nurse, the teacher, and the classmates support this kid?
Yeah, and I appreciate you for, making a book that includes, because a lot of people don't include the fact that this does benefit children, who have seizures and other types of disorders. And this is something that has been beneficial to them when a lot of medications have not, and what it looks like when we as a whole look at this, like you said, a Scheduled 1 drug, and we demonize people who actually do need it. We did have another comment, being famous, I think it's Siki. It says, weed is like liquor. I'm not drinking around my kids or giving them a drink. It's for grown folks. They said, I don't smoke or drink. When it comes to addiction, people who fall into addictions have bigger issues. If we ban weed, then liquor should be too. Liquor kills tons of people. Did you want to kind of go into that? Because the fact that it is, alcohol is legal. I mean, we did have prohibition, but you can drink and it can have a negative impact on you.
Yeah, so the difference between alcohol and cannabis, and my opinion about whether you should do it, you shouldn't do it, I'm not going there. But the difference between alcohol is that it's actually quite toxic to the body, even in small amounts. So there's no, your body doesn't automatically make alcohol molecules. There is no system that, mimics anything that you produce naturally. It is completely against everything that your body does on a regular basis. Cannabis, on the other hand, has those genetic components that mimic cannabinoids that you make already in your body, and it binds directly to the system that is intended to create homeostasis. So that's really the biggest difference as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Yes, I definitely understand that. And for individuals who, because I think you started a little bit of a back and forth in the comments about whether or not you should, legalize cannabis and the difference between recreational and, I guess, medicinal. Can you explain that a little bit before I let you go?
Yeah. So medicinal is, consumption is consumption. You put it in your body and you it just is what it is. But you know how we be wanting to make things difficult. So from a medical point of view, are we being intentional? Are we, assessing the situation? Do we have goals of use? Are we, or are we just using it because we just want to have a good time? We just feel like this is what we want to do. You're not thinking about it. And, kind of going into the addiction standpoint of it, you can be addicted to anything. You could be addicted to caffeine. You could be addicted to soda. You could be addicted to biting your nails. So really it's a psychological, repetitive pattern that basically your mind says, hey, I want to do this all the time. And it's usually based on some sort of trigger. So whether you're addicted to cannabis, generally it's a psychological dependence. It's usually not a physical, unlike opioids, where your body literally withdraws, or even alcohol. You can die from the withdrawal of alcohol. Cannabis is different in that regard. I forgot the question at this point, but I hope I answered it.
Okay. No, you answered it. I just wanted a little bit of a back and forth between, the difference between, medicinal or for medical purposes and recreational purposes. And people are kind of conflating the two in that particular situation. But I want you to give people your information so they know how to reach out to you if they have questions, because you are the owner of Cannabis Nursing Solutions and all the things that you're doing, because you're speaking all over the place. So I want people to be able to reach out to you and support the things that you're doing.
Yeah, so my website is cannabisnursingsolutions.com. You can email me at gratitude@cannabisnursingsolutions.llc.com. And probably the easiest way to find me is on Instagram, and is at cannabisnursingsolutions.com. I mean, kind of Cannabis Nursing Solutions. And you can just email me from there, send me DMs, I respond. So.
See, and you saw all that magic. I didn't do a thing. It just magically appeared. It's just beautiful. I love it. I love it. I want to appreciate you for coming on here and giving the information, because it is definitely a hot topic issue, and it's something that we all should be talking about, even though it goes and it comes and it goes and ebbs and flows when it comes to cannabis and legalizing it. So thank you again for being here. You are amazing for the culture, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we are going to be talking about the culture. We got some topics for the culture coming up. Of course, we've got to talk about R. Kelly, but we're also going to talk about whether or not you should have to buy food for your ex's kids if they don't have McDonald's money. I know we all heard that. Do you have McDonald's money? That particular day, these kids did not. And we are going to talk about it because it is going around social media right after this.
How about sushi?
I just had sushi for lunch yesterday.
How about tacos?
Automatic emergency braking, one of 6 advanced safety features standard on every 2022 Chevy Equinox. Find new technology. Find new roads. Chevrolet.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Farajii Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
Are the only bins that will accommodate larger overboard.
They put 10 in here?
10, and you don't come out till you die. And you eat here, you eat 10.
Oh my God.
All right. Thank you so much for tuning into the second half of For the Culture with Farajii Muhammad. I am Lise Winnie. I am filling in for Farajii while he is on vacation. He will be back in a few weeks. But we want to get to talking about the culture. The culture has been in the streets talking about this particular issue, about whether or not your ex should purchase food for your children. So there was actually this story that came out about, or video rather, about a man who showed up to give his son food. Now, it appears that the two of them had been dating, and he had recently broken up with the mother. Now, the mother has 4 children in total, one of which that she has with this gentleman, and she completely got upset when he brought only food for his own child. And now it has brought up the conversation, should you have to provide food for your ex's or your spouse's children if you have a child with that particular person? I want to bring Jesse back into the fold because I know that he has a lot to say about this particular issue, because we talked about it a little bit, about what is appropriate. when you saw this video, what did you think originally?
So, of course, I got tagged on it as everybody else does, and I didn't have any facts about what was happening. So I just hit play, and what it looked like was basically somebody was using a video to ambush a guy who brought food for a child. And then as you listen longer, it was like, okay, well, now we're getting some backstory. She's got 3 other kids that were not his, and he brought food. I didn't know anything about the past relationship, anything like that. So naturally, I thought, okay, well, this man's obviously trying to show love to his kid. He got food for his kid. But I'm one of the people, I guess, from the comments that I saw, who is in the rare boat of like kind of seeing all sides of this.
Okay. So you do see all sides. So what I want to do is actually for those of you who have not seen this, I actually want to play it so that you guys can get a better understanding before we go, because I think we're going to go back and forth, because I don't see all sides. I'm not an all sides girl on this issue. So I want to put that up so that we can actually see all parts of this.
And day my baby daddy come here with one meal for my child, but I have 3 other kids. We have 1 kid together, but he only want to come and bring one thing at McDonald's. But what about my other kids? How come you can't feed my other kids at McDonald's though? Like that's bogus as hell. Like you're not finna sit here and make my other kids feel left out, and you're only bringing one child something to eat. Look, there he go, and I bet you he only got one thing in there. I bet you he don't even. I'm finna expose out of him so people can see how he really is. It ain't more than enough food in that bag for everybody. What's up? Because I'm finna expose you. What? Because that don't look enough for all my kids. That don't look enough for all my kids. What is that? That's just one burger? One burger, one fry?
What he like? What do you mean?
Okay, what about my other kids? I don't get my food stamps to the 7.
Lisa, how is that my problem?
But if you're trying to help out though, you're not helping out.
I'm not trying to help. I'm trying to help my son.
But how are you helping your son when you're only getting food for just him and not the other kids, his siblings? Them are his siblings though. He's not finna eat in front of all his other siblings, and they're not eating on McDonald's. No, why do I gotta put?
Bring him out to the car.
No. He's not finna eat that shit at all if you can't bring enough for everybody.
Lisa, so you telling me that I gotta bring? So when I bring my son food, I gotta bring your kids food too now?
Yes.
You sound dumb.
How is that dumb? You sound dumb. You sound dumb.
Where are they daddies at? Nobody told you to talk to them other. You had them other kids. They're your responsibility. They're not my responsibility.
Okay, but if you're gonna bring one, you need to bring it for all. How do that shit look that I'm letting one child eat McDonald's and all the rest of the kids can't eat no fucking McDonald's? So you know I get food stamps on the 11th.
3 kids that ain't mine. 3 kids that ain't mine.
Yeah, McDonald's. You know I get food stamps on the 11th.
3 kids that ain't mine. 3 kids that ain't mine.
Yeah, they're his siblings. You knew what you was getting into when you had a baby with me.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did.
You expect me to take care of all the kids? They're not my kids.
Okay, but you still had a baby with me who have kids with other people. I still have other kids. Because I'm exposing you. Everybody think you such a motherfucking good daddy. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're full of shit in this bullshit. You only come here with one piece of food for one child.
The child that's mine, silly.
No, that's dumb that you can't feed the other kids. Don't feed nobody at all then. He can't take that shit. He can't eat it.
Maybe if you had 1 or 2, I can maybe. You got it's 3 extra kids. What the f? All like go to my mother account, spend money on all those kids. Them not my kids.
Them are your kids' siblings though. Dumb.
So that's what you gonna go with? That's the one you gonna
Those are your fucking kids' siblings.
They my.
All right, so it's a lot of language and a lot of things going on. But for you said you see everyone's side in this particular situation.
Yes, I think I do. So the first thing, and I think the obvious point is from the father's perspective, he's looking at it as this is food for my child. I don't think there's anything wrong with a father bringing food for his child, and the other children were not his responsibility. Okay. But the backstory that we're getting is that he was with her and was providing food for all of the kids prior to this video and prior to them breaking up. Mm-hmm. So if that's the case, then the kids have been accustomed to a certain standard. Doesn't necessarily mean that he would ever be legally obligated to continue providing for those kids. But I do think it's hard to take kids that have gotten accustomed to you bringing food for them and then saying, okay, well, I only care about the one of you. From the mom's perspective, it's interesting because I think that what she's trying to do is not make other kids feel less than. And I think that she's trying to advocate so that they all are on equal footing. I also think that moms don't get enough credit for the time that they actually spend with kids, because obviously he wasn't with the kids. She has the kids at her house. Right. So I think there's a lot to be said about somebody. I have one, and I know it can be difficult deal with one all day. I can't imagine 4. So I think she's trying to express a standard of equity with all of the kids. And then likewise, I think that we oftentimes get confused between what legally would be allowable if he were to say, because people were like, oh, go sue for custody, get your kid, all this stuff. And I agree. Legally, I don't think that he would ever be held responsible. They weren't married, it sounds like. So he's not going to be held responsible for all of them. But I do think that there is something to be said for the approach, right? So being able to pick up your kid and deciding that while he's out with you, you're going to take him to McDonald's. That's one thing. Mm-hmm. Or even bringing, people talking about bringing a Little Caesars pizza, bringing a hot and ready, right? Like bringing something like that. It's different. I think, from the fact that she already had the recording and it sounds like she already knew what his motive is. He's done this before, right? So they probably had a conversation about this before, and she was recording him for the purpose, I guess, of catching him in the act and exposing him. I don't think it makes him necessarily a bad father because he won't bring food for the other kids, but I do think there's a little bit more than the innocence that I initially saw this video with.
Well, I see you coming with all the legal, you got the legal mind and all of those types of things. So here's my perspective. And I know I saw the mother's rebuttal. She did come out and say that they had been dating and he was providing the food. But I think that in this society and culture, we get mixed up with things that would be nice and things that people are obligated to do. That would have been nice. It would have made him a great guy had he not just been like, no, y'all don't have McDonald's money. Just my son. What you want, a double cheeseburger? Like, that's messed up. But he's not obligated to do that. I think the mother's anger is displaced with the fault, because first of all, she chose him. Let's start there. Right. And then 2, we also have to realize that these aren't his children. He makes a valid point that, where are these other children's parents as well? It's not a nice thing to do. I think that he would have been a great guy had he just said, hey, and plus, I don't know your name, sir, but if you would have just brought groceries, problem solved. Like, just buy, bread and cheese and apples, and it could have stretched out instead of the McDonald's food. That's problematic. But I think for the mother to put this out there on the internet is not okay.
Oh,
and
it's not
it doesn't justify this behavior at all. So do you think that this is a bad look for women? Because we already have this back and forth between men and women anyway on social media, especially Black men and women, which is unfortunate on social media. Absolutely. Because I saw people going after the way that the woman looked. It was like, she looks the way I thought she would. And I don't even know what that means.
There's so much to it. And I hate when these videos go viral. I mean, shout out to her, get your likes. But I hate when these things go viral, because I think that, we know that people are watching our community and they're trying to look for those opportunities to divide what unity we do have. And usually along gender roles is kind of where the division is going to come. It seemed like on, all the social media I was looking at, there was a divide where there were women who were supportive of the woman and men who were supportive of the man, right? And everybody, makes their philosophical points here and there. And what's sad is in all of those conversations, it feels like what gets missing is the kids, which is like kind of the priority, I would guess. Right. I don't think that there's anybody, well, maybe there are, but I don't think there's anybody who is condemning the guy for bringing food for his kid. Like, nobody is trying to say that he's.
That's a good point.
Right. We're not saying that's wrong. But if the background facts are true, and if he only changed up because they broke up, right? And now he's like, well, it's only this, but you've been taking care of the kids before. then I can see kind of where she is coming from to say, well, why are you changing now? Just because we didn't work out. Again,
so is there a time limit? Is there a
Mm-hmm.
time limit in between when you break up where he would have to take care of them forever? Or is it a couple months? Like, what does that look like?
Nope. I think it's a very slippery slope, right? Because it starts with, cheeseburgers from McDonald's, and then it goes to Nikes, and then it goes to tuition. It's a very slippery slope, right?
Okay.
So I don't think that he should be responsible for all of the kids per se. I just feel like it felt to me, the fact that she had the recording ready to go and all this stuff, it feels to me like this isn't the first conversation, right? This is another conversation that they've had, and he probably has already been told. And if he had been told prior, then the simple explanation to me is, "Hey, I'm coming to pick up, Jay Jr. We're gonna go out, and I'll bring him back." It's not, well, I'll fix you. Let me bring,
wouldn't
food.
that still have made her feel some kind of way? Because she's saying that she doesn't have food for those children, and if he came to pick him up, his kid. Take the kid, I believe it's a boy, take his son to McDonald's. You can't tell me that there wouldn't have been an argument that ensued.
I mean, I don't know. It probably would, because if people are determined that they're going to have an issue, they're going to have an issue. But I think the optics look better, right? It's different when your son is with you and you've gone out. I'm always sensitive, particularly when it comes to women who are raising the kids. Like, I'm always sensitive because you get the luxury, if you're not there, of being wherever you are, with whoever you with, doing what you want, and she's in the house with 4 kids all day. Right. And if she doesn't have groceries, one of them at least is yours, right? So I think there's some level of credence that you have to give for the fact that she's going through that. I also feel like we don't know, his situation either. Like, I don't know if, this is his last meal. He had a coupon from McDonald's, whatever the case may be. We don't know what his situation is. So I don't think that I think that the optics of it are really the thing that hurts me. Just as a Black community, I feel like we're so much better than this. So it feels bad, but I do know, it's an interesting point of discussion. And I think that, hurt people, right? So everybody who has been hurt before, if you're a guy and you feel like you don't win in the court system and all this stuff, then I feel like you're going to come in with your emotions about what you think he did that was right or wrong. And I think if you are a woman who has been screwed over by a dude that doesn't do what he's supposed to do, or who has been petty after a breakup, then I think that, it's going to be polarizing and you're going to go to the side you're on. But I really think I see all sides of the situation. And I don't know necessarily that there is a right or wrong for either party. I think if anything, it's just a lesson to us to take care of your responsibilities and make sure that you are knowledgeable about the person that you are having a child with, and you understand what the gravity of the situation will be and act accordingly.
Right. And I do want to put it out there. Just because you have children, I don't believe that means children prior to you getting into a relationship, that becomes that person's responsibility if you guys do not get married or have an agreement. But I also want to say that I think that had this not happened like this, like she threw the food, maybe she could have said, I don't want my other children to feel left out. Your food back with you. I think that would have probably helped the situation when we're talking about optics, but the culture is talking right now. They're saying, Damon Blissett is saying the expectations for a guy to pay for other kids that aren't his should not be placed on him. If he chooses to do so, it's cool. Right. I kind of agree. McCall said the mother made another video stating that the ex-boyfriend had been purchasing food for the other 3 children, but he stopped once they broke up, which, I mean, that's probably what would typically happen. Like I said, if he was a great person, he would have continued, but he's probably just like most of us. Like we don't know why they broke up either.
Absolutely.
So that's there as well. We also have heck no. If you are married or dating someone and one kid is his or hers and y'all together, then yes, he or she should. But exes, no way. I agree. If he was actually still living in the house, this would have been absolutely appalling. But the fact that he doesn't live there, I'm like, it's up in the air. Hotep Pan Africa said his actions were insensitive. However, he has no obligation We should, however, organize our community to nurture all of our collective children. I agree there.
He's on my level. I agree.
Yeah. Willie Frazier says, as a man with no kids who has fed plenty of other guys' kids, I'm with the dude. Ain't my fault you're broke and your other baby daddies are broke. I don't know. Don't say that. Mike B, thank you for checking in. He's saying these are all tribulations of multi-tenant parenting in the Black community. Folks keep advocating for this sort of family arrangement, though. Do you think that this is what we're advocating for? Like this single structure? I don't think that's what's fun.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, what I'm advocating for is I'm advocating for people to take care of their responsibilities, but I'm also advocating for children, right? So I feel like, it's knowing myself. If I had a situation where there were other kids that I knew were hungry, I'm probably going to take care of all the kids. Now, I don't think that is something that everybody should do, but I am very sensitive to kids being hungry, right? Like I'm very sensitive to that. Likewise, would I expect a phone call or some degree of appreciation from the father of those kids or from the mom? Probably, right?
Okay.
But I would hope that I'm doing this in good faith because they're going to do the same for my kid. Like I wouldn't want them to be like, hey, I'm taking my 2 kids to Disney World. Your kid can stay here. Like I wouldn't want that. I would definitely, talk to them to work it out. But I mean, this is one of the reasons why for me, like in dating, kids are a different issue. Like I don't necessarily want to date somebody who already has a situation going on, just because I know these issues come up and everybody might not be mature enough to be able to navigate those spaces.
Yeah, I mean, and Turner family said something along those lines. She's like, she is correct with he knew what he was getting into having a baby with her. And I agree, he is not responsible for the kids that are not his, but men need to stop laying with women who have children unless they want to be step up daddies. And that's kind of what you were saying. Like you going into this situation, you do have to put the children in mind, because I think that's one thing. You're right. No one is really talking about the kids. Like imagine you're sitting there, he's and you're just sitting there hungry and he's getting all of these benefits. I think you would start resenting your brother. So it could cause problems down the road. But I think that, again, this is a parent issue and this could have been handled like 2 adults and it just isn't, or it wasn't handled like 2 adults. And unfortunately, we're going to continue to see people have discussions about this because I think you're right. I just personally think that we need to get out of the mindset of people being nice and then expectations will always leave you disappointed when you are expecting somebody to do something. I'm like, girl, you knew him, you was dating him, you knew what he was about. So why did you expect him to be any different once you weren't together? That's all I'm saying. That's a problem.
You're right. But like I think there's a Black American code of conduct that's a little bit different from everybody else. Right. So there are certain things on this pendulum of respect that people have valued and that we feel like are just values for our community that may not necessarily always be shared. And we're typically shocked when people don't share those values, right? So I agree with you. I think, he's under no obligation. I also agree that, we expect that if there's going to be hungry kids, somebody's going to step up. We don't know what's going on with the other dad or dads, however many there are. We don't know what their story is. But I will say, in the grand scheme of things, if we're prioritizing our future, the future of our community as a collective, then I think there needs to be some kind of understanding about like kids need to eat, something that kids need. And granted, it's not his fault to be like, oh, I got to take care of the kids every time they get hungry or whatever. But she says her stamps haven't come in. They don't get into the 11th. At this point, we know. I think, it's cool to get food. You obviously got food for your kid. That's cool. But I think there's an understanding here of she's already doing so much on her own with 4 kids, including yours, right? There's so much that there can be a certain degree of help, right, in that situation to make sure that nobody's going hungry. But I know people are probably not going to agree with that, but that's my position.
I agree. You would have been an amazing man had you just brought extra. You could have got it off the dollar menu if they still. I don't even know now with this inflation if they still got the dollar menu, but you could have. You could have at least done that to do something, or just like I said, buy groceries. That would have solved the problem. Then she could have delegated it to the children as she saw fit. It would have been perfect. But I also want to talk a little bit or briefly about R. Kelly. He did get a sentence. The sentence got passed down yesterday. He got 30 years in prison. This is again, the culture has been talking about this one. Some people are saying that it was too much. Like he got too much time because they were looking at Jeffrey Epstein's girlfriend who only got 20 years. He actually got charged in 2019 and he was convicted on 1 count of racketeering and 8 counts of violating the Mann Act. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think this is good or is not enough or what?
So first, I don't know that R. Kelly is going to be the hill that I want to die on when we're talking about racial disparities, right? I feel like he terrorized Black women for a long time, and this is justice. This is what happens when you finally get caught. He had a long run, and he had plenty of warnings along the way. So, he did get convicted of 9 different counts. Jillian Epstein, she got convicted of 5. I do think, they had the possibility of giving him even more than 30. I think he could have did life. So they gave him 30 when I think the prosecution was asking for, I want to say 20, I think it was 25.
Yeah.
They gave him 30. Now we all know that once you are in the grips of the court system and the judicial system, there are going to be there's going to be inequality on a race basis anyway. We know that, right? But once you have already done all of these things, it's kind of like, I don't, it's not, we're talking about an innocent person. There are innocent people who get convicted all the time and they get all kinds of inflated sentences that they don't deserve. And then we can do comparative analysis about, but you didn't do this to so-and-so. But this one, it's kind of like, hey, brother, like you got caught. We told you to stop. You didn't.
We did. Sorry. And his music is you go back and listen to it. They weren't just dog whistles. Like my mind is telling me no, but my body it seems like she's ready. I'm like, what were we thinking when we were listening to this? He married Aaliyah and we just went, it's fine. It's fine. So I am upset that I do see so many people demonizing these girls. I'm not saying that some of the parents aren't just as wrong because some of these parents brought their children there knowing what was going to happen. They used their children in order to try to get some money. I'm not saying that's not true, but what we can't do is excuse his behavior because we want to blame the victim, which I honestly think we have an issue with that in our community. I think sometimes we don't know how to really address that because it's like, it's a Black man in the criminal justice system. We know that it typically can be harder on Black men, but at the same time, he's abusing Black women. Absolutely. So I think we're stuck in the middle. Like, what do we do in that situation?
So it's so many levels to it because there are legitimate people who are convicted of crimes who did not do what they were convicted of, who are Black and who had all kinds of books thrown at them that they shouldn't have gotten, right? And we can find those people and definitely advocate for those people. But R. Kelly is not Nelson Mandela, right? So I think we need to be clear about that. The other thing that I want to be clear about is our society in America is really anti-Black women. It's like if a Black woman says something happened, people try to discredit her. People try to say, oh, well, she asked for it. Like all this stuff that's not very helpful. And the only thing I could think about with R. Kelly was how many women tried to come forward and everybody kept saying whatever. We all heard about allegedly this tape from years ago that was going around from barbershop to barbershop, right? So it's not like we didn't know. It's not like there wasn't evidence. It's not like he didn't get hemmed up by the court system before and got warning after warning and found ways to get out of it. On top of that, R. Kelly, he ain't the regular Black person. He had tons of money. He wasn't hurt. So he had legal representation, all the things that actual innocent Black people typically do not have. Fair representation, being able to have due process, all those things. He had it. He had it. On top of that, we see him going off on Gail. Like we see right?
Robert.
They got trying to destroy my life. So, I'll say this, nothing in my eyes will ever diminish the quality of a work product that he's able to do when he's focused on music, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can separate music from a person. There are a lot of horrible people that make great music, right?
Okay.
But at the same time, the court system isn't supposed to care about that. You aren't supposed to just be able to skate through charges just because you made Chocolate Factory. Like it doesn't work like that, right? So this is him, his chicken's coming home to roost, and he's having to deal with the consequences of what happened. The one thing I don't want our community to do is to go down this rabbit hole of, well, why him when this other guy who did this? If you molesting kids, right? This is not a comparative analysis at this point. We need you out and to save the kids and save the victims from being able to go through all this stuff. And we knew part of him having money was him having people in place that insulated him from liability, and him intimidating a lot of these women who were coming after him, telling him, saying what he did. So he's done essentially, arguably the same thing that Donald Trump is currently doing right now with the January 6th. Right. And yet, at the same time, I feel like I can't have any kind of loyalty to R. Kelly when I know that he's harming my community even more so than he is benefiting.
Correct. And I agree. Like we will have to either separate his music or don't listen to his music, because I know some people don't want to stream it because he, gets money from it. But the culture has spoken. They're saying, nope, Donita Jackson said, nope, Kel's got what he deserved. The fact that white men / women didn't get what he got doesn't absolve him of anything. I agree. It says Brother King Lee says Mr. Kelly got what he deserves. However, I still love some of his songs. Yes, that Bump and Grind song is one of my faves. Everybody loves those songs. We still love them. Janae said he got his due. He didn't let them girls go, and he was abusing them in all kind of ways. 30 years is enough time for him to write songs of remorse songs. Okay, I agree with that. And it says, Real Brooklyn says, I really can't say if he's innocent when he married a 15-year-old. Of course, at that time, we didn't care because he was making hits. Somebody needs to look at them Isley brothers. Just saying. I don't know. Please don't. Let's not throw them in there. I don't know about Ron and them. But I will say that R. Kelly definitely, I believe the culture has spoken. They're saying that he got his just due. And I think most people would agree that he just had this coming. It's been a long time.
Absolutely.
It's been a long time. Seems like you're ready, R. Kelly. Seems like you're ready for jail now. So you go on and serve that sentence. It's all done. I want to thank you, Jesse, for coming on today. You are absolutely awesome. And for those individuals who want to listen to your podcast or how can they listen?
Definitely. So I have two. One is Brothers-in-Law. That's BRUTHAS, the letter N, and then LAW, where we talk about legal issues with my podcast partner, Sean Carter. I also have a YouTube show called The Pan-Africana Show. And it is our attempt to try to bridge the gap across the diaspora in talking to Black people from all over the world and trying to help us build bridges between the continent and between all of the diaspora so that we can hopefully put a network together and be able to try to get away from our dependence on white establishment. So definitely feel free to check us out. And you can also reach me on social media at J Hamilton McCoy 2.
And he is so intelligent, so smart, so funny. You will absolutely love following him. I love everything that he does. He's absolutely awesome. I would say go Blue Devils, but I'm in Maryland, so the Turks, and I can't do that.
Fair
but
enough.
I appreciate everything that you do.
Well, I thank you for having me, and all of the things that you said about me, I will send you the check in the mail. I appreciate what you said. But I am just so happy to see your growth and so happy to see you pursuing all kinds of opportunities.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right, folks, that has been The Culture. The Culture has spoken. We have talked about everything from January 6th all the way up until R. Kelly. I want you guys to make sure that you go to the Black Star Network or the Black Star Network app and download it in your Play Store so that you can get so much great content and support Black content creators and give so much back to the community and tell stories that aren't often told in mainstream media. Thank you so much. Farajii will be back soon. We appreciate you. Have a good day.
iPhone 13 on us for every customer. Current, new, everyone. To show the love.
How about sushi?
I just had sushi for lunch yesterday.
How about tacos?
Automatic emergency braking, one of 6 advanced safety features standard on every 2022 Chevy Equinox. Find new technology. Find new roads. Chevrolet.